Hello and welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig out of Star Shop Studio in Times Square. Today we are talking about some of the highest profile legal cases with an amazing litigator, Misty Marris, who I had the pleasure of working with on HLN this past week. And we are talking about the texting suicide case, and we're also talking about the Penn State hazing case. So these are very high profile cases that really need to be looked at both psychologically and legally. And Misty, welcome. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to break these down with you because these two cases, the psychology and the law, really go hand in hand. And you can't have one without the other.
They do. And it's really interesting for me too, because someone will ask me, what do I think about certain, people in these cases? And I can analyze them psychologically, but what that translates into legally, I have no idea. And each state is slightly different, which is where you come in.
That certainly is.
And I also forgot to mention that you are host of LegalNews.com, which is Dan Abrams. He created this whole network of legal news. It's almost like where Court TV used to be. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
You want to tell us let's start with that.
Yes.
I want to hear all about legal news, and we will have information on my Facebook page so you can find it and also find Misty. What are they doing on legal news?
So this is really amazing because there's so many interesting trials going on, and we're covering them on Law News. We're covering them gavel to gavel.
Wow.
So we're taking the viewers live into the courtroom. We're live streaming the trials. And then we're coming out, we're doing commentary in real time.
Is this on Facebook? Now, where can people find legalnews.com? It's on a separate website.
Yes, so we're live streaming on the internet, lawnews.com, LAWNEWZ.
Yes,
.com.
Z.
That's because Dan Abrams is cool. He's not going to go with that S. He's going to go for Dan. Is amazing.
Yeah.
This was Dan's. It's a passion project. Dan's idea. He's so amazing to work with, and it's really filling a gap.
It is.
Because without Court TV, we're kind of losing that real-time trial coverage. So
absolutely, and people were addicted to TV. It was a whole cottage industry after OJ, who is obviously re-emerging, but
guess what we were covering on Law News? We were there live for the parole hearing and really breaking it down, going back into some of the old footage. We had guests that were very involved in the original trial. So Law News is definitely a great resource for legal junkies who want to get in the courtroom.
And there are a lot of legal junkies. As far as OJ, that was really interesting because in some ways, according to the law, it was right to let him out on parole, but there's so many people that feel that he is a murderer, and from that standpoint, it's not right. And the fact that he's going to get all these job offers, reality TV. I just wonder who's going to back these shows. Like, what commercials are backing these shows? That I don't know.
It's really interesting because he did, when he was in his parole hearing, which to a lot of people, not really a laughing matter, but it had this light feel that was a little bit odd. He said, oh, maybe I'll start doing commentary. Maybe I'll have a blog. Maybe I'll do it. It was really interesting. But it's so funny that you say that you talk about the public pushback in that case, because at the parole hearing, one of the officers making the decision took out a stack of documents this big, and she said, these are all the letters of people that think you should not be released because you owe a civil judgment, multi-million-dollar judgment that you haven't paid, and people are really holding you accountable for those notorious, the murder of Nicole Brown. So that was really interesting. And then they went and said, hey, we're not taking that into consideration, rightfully so under the law. But those are where the line is blurred.
That's where it's hard to kind of understand where the law comes in. And psychologically, it's not always gratifying.
Oh, it's not.
Right?
No.
It's not always gratifying. Let's talk about the one case that we were talking about, because I think this is so interesting, both legally and psychologically. Michelle Carter, of course, is the girl who encouraged her boyfriend via text, who was suicidal, to kill himself. And the turning point was when he was in the car, he got scared, and he said, I want to get out. And she said, you get back in there. I think we have a text that, see, that's what you mean, you keep pushing it off. Like, this girl was really murderous by proxy. and the court found her guilty and sentenced her to 2.5 years. But as we know, that may never happen. So take us through that legally.
Oh, absolutely. So here in this case, it all starting from the beginning, this is a case of first impression for Massachusetts. So there are certain states around the country where they have encouraging suicide laws. So it covers a case like this, where you're talking about mere encouragement. Because let's not forget, in this case, it's death by text. It's words over text messages. It's not somebody standing there assisting in person. So this is really new. Massachusetts didn't have a law that covered that, so she was charged with involuntary manslaughter. That's a high level. You got to show reckless disregard for human life.
Now, and I have to say, from a psychological perspective, I was like, where's the involuntary component of it? It felt voluntary to me. She had an intent to have him dead.
Oh.
The intention was clear. And let's not forget, you know, people can be murderous, but the healthy person neutralizes that aggression and doesn't act on it. Here we have somebody who I think was attracted to her boyfriend because he was suicidal and she was murderous. And it was that perfect combination in an odd way that worked for both of them. Both these kids were not well. But the fact that she was so intent and had this goal to have him dead, when someone's a teenager, and the impact a girlfriend has on you, just the impact peers have on teens, it's huge. And so I didn't see it as just technology. I think technology can be very damaging.
Oh, yes, and the judge agreed with you.
Yeah.
So in this case, the defense waived a jury trial. This was a judge who made the decision. But this is taking the law and stretching it a little bit beyond what it's written, because let's not forget, the law somehow cannot catch up with technology.
Why
it's
is
happening
that?
too quickly. It's not contemplated by the legislature. So it takes cases like this to really push that envelope. The judge focused on a moment that you pointed out. And it's so interesting because from your psychological perspective, you're seeing the same thing that he did legally. That's that moment, he was, Conrad Roy was in the car and he wanted to back out. And she said, get back in there. Finish the job. That was it. She listened.
It was like a cheerleader for death.
It was. It was absolutely crazy. And then the aftermath was even worse. She listened to him die on the phone. She didn't call the police.
No.
She didn't call the parents. And in the judge's very articulate sentencing, he said, she didn't say a few magic words. Get out of the car.
Right. You know, there are studies from a psychological perspective. There's a very interesting psychologist who majors or studies and specializes in suicide. He had a father who suicided, and he married somebody whose parents suicided. So he was really interested in this area. And he found out that people who survived suicide attempts wanted to live. And there were people that were on the fence. They had an intention to commit suicide, and someone smiled at them, and they made a different decision.
Wow.
And that's why they, on bridges, will have these, I guess, I don't know, walls or gates to make it harder for people to suicide. They found that it reduced the amount of suicides that happen. So if you make it harder for someone to suicide, or if the right intervention happens at the right time, it can change everything. So from a psychological perspective, to know that somebody is coaching somebody into death is more powerful than a loaded gun, or just as powerful. It's, you know, words have an impact. And so I was glad that the judge wanted to use this as a case to highlight to other kids out there, don't do this.
Yes, it's really holding people responsible for their words.
That's right.
Look, this is not an isolated case. This is a very extreme situation. I mean, I think we can all agree it's a unique case, very extreme situation. Interesting, it happens to be in a state that doesn't have a statute that's on point. So this was a lot of legal issues relating to that case. But let's talk about in schools. Cyberbullying, where the line is drawn between when a school can be held responsible for the deaths of some of these kids who are being bullied and then commit suicide.
And I think it's a community issue. where the whole community needs to get involved and have a zero tolerance for cyberbullying, because you never want to be in that position where you can save a child's life and that doesn't happen. But it does, any conversation about where the parents were around all of this, where Michelle's parents were, where Conrad's parents were about this relationship or about their kids' mental health?
Yeah, so as I said, we covered this gavel to gavel. We were in that courtroom watching, and there was testimony from his parents. Now, he had struggled, Conrad Roy had struggled with issues for a long time. That was absolutely not contested, but they went very carefully over the time frame shortly before he committed suicide. His mother talked about how he was doing so much better. He was expressing excitement about going to college. He was expressing excitement about other, just the ins and outs of day-to-day life, being on vacation, this and that. And so his parents really felt that he had taken strides, and he had gone through counseling in the past. So they did not know that he was on that verge at the time that this happened, when this actually came to pass.
And of course, the truth of the matter is, if somebody is very seriously suicidal, sometimes they do present as happy right before because they feel relieved, or they don't want anyone to know. So that in and of itself doesn't tell the whole picture. But I was disturbed by the hired expert, the hired psychiatrist. I was disturbed. And I think I let him know that on the air.
Yes, I believe you did, and you did an excellent job telling him how you disagreed.
And he was probably like, and he did say, he's like, did you see all the text back and forth? But basically, this psychiatrist's position was absolutely maddening, and I thought a little dangerous. He claimed that Michelle's medication was not FDA approved, and I don't know how many medications are FDA approved for children across the board. So that's an interesting question. I don't have the answer, but I don't know if these medications are FDA approved for children, period. So, but he seemed to claim that the medication she was on made her a sociopath.
Right. So
I've never read that. He claims he did a study on it.
Yes. So you have it right. So let's just take a step back, though, because these are experts testifying at trial.
Right.
And I agree. I watched that testimony. I watched the expert testimony from a different perspective than you.
Oh.
I watched it for the effectiveness that it had on the defense case.
Yeah.
And when he got off the stand, I thought to myself, that was not good. That did not help her.
I'm glad to hear that.
What he argued was something called involuntary intoxication. He said that her mental state was clouded because she was taking these medications. Her medications had changed. Dosages had changed. They were not making her aware of what she was saying, what she was doing. But look, if you're a defense attorney, you're not doing the right thing unless your expert on the stand is saying something that would be a helpful theory of your case. And I'm not saying that, by no means do I mean this guy is a defense hack. But it is
what I
important.
would have said, and there is a certain psychological strategy. I think this would have been more powerful. I don't know if you know this, but somebody asked me what
us lawyers have to come to people like you. We're like, we don't know what these people are thinking.
I was asked this by a makeup artist at CNN, and she said, if you weren't doing what you were doing, what would you want to do? And I was like, I really love what I'm doing, but maybe I would want to be a defense attorney because it's so creative, and you're smart and you're thinking about maybe helping certain people. But there is this psychological strategy called joining. And so the idea is if you join with somebody's defenses, then it gets them to want to do the opposite. So if somebody says, I want to go kill myself, and you say, maybe that's something worth exploring. They'll say, what do you mean that's something worth exploring? You want me dead? So there is a strategy that some therapists will employ with if they have the right relationship with the patient, if they know it works for the patient's psychology. But that's what I would have said, that she was trying a strategy to help him not commit suicide by joining his defenses to get him to do the opposite.
Oh, Robbie, that could have been very effective.
I think that would have been more powerful.
Yeah. Well, and I think you might be right because the involuntary intoxication,
come on.
I mean, it was
even
a joke.
when we're drunk, because when you're intoxicated, you are disinhibited. So you're just doing what you want to do anyway.
Right. And there were messages that came after the fact that really undercut
Right.
that. So it wasn't really consistent.
Now, according to the aunt,
Oh, I heard, yeah. Let's
the
get into
aunt,
this.
okay, so Conrad Roy's aunt was interviewed, and she said that after this death, Michelle Carter wanted some of his ashes. I'm like that. I'm not okay.
No,
I think
that's more of a question for you than my legal realm.
Yeah.
But she did go. Michelle Carter, after his death, you'd see what unfolded at the trial. She did go on almost a campaign. She spoke to a lot of friends about how upset she was, the sadness. On the flip side, she had a lot of texts saying, if somebody reads my text, I'm going to be in big trouble.
Yeah.
So,
sounds like a black widow to me, right? Those wives who kill their husbands, and they're almost serial killers, because then they, let me just tell you, I feel sorry for this woman's future mother-in-law. I can't see who would ever accept her.
There's going to be, I think, a tough dating period for this
definitely
girl.
Think. Now, Amanda Knox. Okay, so for those of you who may not remember, Amanda Knox was in Italy. She was called Foxy
Noxie,
Foxy Noxie.
Good nickname.
Right, and she was accused of killing her roommate, right? And the Italian press was all over it because they really felt that she was guilty. And it was hard to know whether it was xenophobia or something else. But Amanda Knox came out supporting this woman, Michelle, stating that she was being perceived or presented as a femme fatale and it was unfair. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I can actually understand why Amanda Knox might have that position, given the fact that...
Did you think she was guilty?
Did I think... It was really hard to tell. So we're talking about the Italian system of law. It's a little bit different. There did not seem, as that trial unraveled, I'm not sure that would have really held water here.
Yeah.
Whether or not she acted very suspicious, the evidence just wasn't necessarily there from the United States system, but she certainly had that reputation, and the press really went crazy with Amanda Knox.
Yeah.
It was hard to tell what was real and what wasn't.
And I think it still is, but my feeling when I saw her protecting Michelle was that she is projecting, that she is basically assuming who she is, this innocent victim, is who Michelle Carter is. Now, there are some psychiatrists who will say, you can't make somebody else kill themselves. Everybody has a will to either live or die. And I would say that may be true for an adult, although I'd say a caveat if somebody is not well. I don't know how true that is. But when somebody is a teen and they are vulnerable and care a lot about what their peers think, and they're all trying to be loved in some odd way, I would say that doesn't count. So although I think Amanda Knox might have been well-intended, I think she was terribly off base because she confused her case and her issues with this woman who I think is in a very different category.
Well, and you definitely tend to relate to other people, right? When you see, especially with all the press coverage, this case, she's a young girl, Amanda Knox was a young girl when this happened. But her opinion is shared by some other people. And from a legal perspective, there is something, it's called superseding cause.
Okay.
It's that your autonomous act, so the autonomous act that you took, in this case was suicide, supersedes any sort of causal link that would come from Michelle Carter. So her telling you to do it is cut off by the fact that you are the one that took this action. That's a legal theory. A legal theory the defense tried to propose.
Yeah.
So again, in Massachusetts, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on appeal because it is a case of first impression. It's stretching the law to somewhere where it hasn't been before.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, one of the reasons why the family was really upset because the judge gave her a supervised release during the pending appeal.
Yeah.
So she's home. She's home now. She can't travel.
I have to say, I was upset by that too.
It's
I was
unusual.
upset by that
Let's
too.
just put it this way. But
why do you think he did that?
So the standard when you're considering whether or not to do a supervised release, as opposed to many people who are convicted and are in prison pending their appeal, what's called a novel legal issue. So when you have a novel legal issue, and in this case, this is kind of the quintessential novel legal issue because it's new.
Right.
So that's why the judge did it. The family, I mean, you're talking about, this is almost 4 years now to get to this point.
Oh,
so that's really tough on the family.
Do you think she will ever see prison time?
You know, it's going to be tough. I do think a Massachusetts appeals court will probably. She probably will. She'll probably serve for 15 months. The question is when.
Yeah, well, I hope she does, and I hope this is a landmark case because I think we do need to send a message out there that your words matter and accountability, and if you are not going to be a moral person, and certain words should be criminalized. Sure. So anyway, we are going to now shift
we
to...
could talk about it all day.
I know,
but we got to move on.
We're going to make it about you now.
Oh,
called Keeping
my
It
favorite
Real.
topic.
Really?
Let's do it.
Right, keeping it real. So we asked a few questions, and then we see what you think, so your fans can know how you think and how you operate and who you are. First question: what is your strongest personal quality?
Oh, my strongest personal quality, I would have to say, just being ready for anything. You find me, I'm ready to go. I'm down.
I love it. Who do you most admire in life?
This is a tough question. I think the person that I most admire is my mother.
Aww.
Yeah, my mother, she passed away.
Aww.
But she will always be my absolute star and my inspiration. She was the most wonderful woman that you could possibly imagine, and I try and emulate her every day.
Oh, well, I'm sure she is looking down and so proud, and was proud while she was here as well. What is one of your most defining moments in life?
Oh my goodness, one of my defining moments. You know, I would actually say that my defining moment would be that day that I crossed over into this realm of television, and I started to do television from legal analyst perspective. I started on Fox News. Great experience there, still continue to work there, but I really am passionate about bringing this information to people. Legal cases, you can get so bogged down, it's hard to understand. These are important issues.
And we need people like you who can simplify it so that we can all embrace it and understand what it means in terms of life.
It's critical.
Yeah.
It's absolutely critical that and you too, as far as medicine, psychiatry, that's all very important because these issues need to be thought about, need to be addressed. And it's really hard when you're listening to the legal mumbo jumbo. You're like falling asleep. We need to get this information out there.
You are so good at, you really are amazing at it, amazing at TV, and really you've been at it for 3 years.
Yeah,
and it's like forever. What is the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received, and this is going to sound so cliche, but it really is, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
We've all been there where you think, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can really hack it.
I have it every day. Every day.
You always have that moment. But if you live by the fact that you can believe in yourself and you can get out there and you can achieve, you've got the golden ticket.
Half the battle. Well, it is a pleasure having you. So everyone can find Misty. You can look on my page for where to find her on legalnews.com, where she is a host, and you can find her on Fox and CNN talking about the latest cases of the day. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week on Monday.